Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the lakeside, and great crowds from Galilee followed him, from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, Transjordania, and the region of Tyre and Sidon. Great numbers who had heard of all he was doing came to him. And he asked his disciples to have a boat ready for him because of the crowd, to keep him from being crushed. For he had cured so many that all who were afflicted in any way were crowding forward to touch him. And the unclean spirits, whenever they saw him, would fall down before him and shout, "You are the Son of God." But he warned them strongly not to make him known. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
And the words of the Gospel wipe away all our sins. Now we're continuing in the first book of Samuel, the story of Samuel's anointed ones. As you remember, Saul, the first king, anointed over Israel by Samuel, and now Saul and David. Bit of conflict going on there, naturally at the human level. And this was forewarned and foretold by Samuel. You know that when you appoint an earthly king or an earthly ruler, that earthly ruler will naturally bring their own weaknesses and failings and incapacities to that role, and will need much in the way of support and understanding and everything else that goes with that role too. And so it is that we see the favour falling in David's direction now on account of his great victory over the Philistine, and the women chanting that in their little victory song, I suppose, as they were returning from battle with the Philistines. And Saul then jealousy coming up in his heart. And this is the case, you see, in any relationship like that. It's sinners who are coming together. And so our weaknesses, our sinfulness, our selfishnesses will tend to come to the fore from time to time. And jealousy is one of those deadly sins that can bring a sort of mortality or death sometimes to a relationship, unless there is room for forgiveness and mercy and understanding. And so we need somehow an intercessor. And it's interesting that Jonathan, who is really the heir to the throne, being that he is Saul's son, rather gives the favour to the anointed one, to King David, recognizing that he is the one the Lord has chosen. And it is Jonathan who defends David to the last, and they make quite a close pact with one another, and Jonathan promising to protect David even with his own life. And so Jonathan has a kindly word with his father, and things are ameliorated for the time being. But as the story unfolds, that jealousy is still rooted strongly in Saul's heart, and he demands things of David which are unreasonable, and no doubt motivated by that jealousy that he would like to see the end of David. And we see the conflict will go on even further. Saul does try to actually kill David and fails. And yet, and here's a lovely message we'll learn from it as we go forward, David does not retaliate. David does not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. It's a very important lesson for all of us to learn when it comes to the church and those in authority and those who are anointed and placed in that charge by the Lord, that we seek to support the Pope and the bishops and the priests, deacons, all who have been given that authority, rather than rally against, and to point fingers and to make accusations and to make, that's not, again, going against the Lord's anointed, even in their weaknesses, certainly not to tolerate. That would be foolish too, not to tolerate obvious weakness or sin, or criminal activity for that matter, certainly not. However, that it's the support, again, not to allow jealousy, you see, and these things, pride to kick in and do such damage as it can do, as we know. So it's a very important lesson. And anyway, Jonathan, fair play, he brought David to Saul, and David attended to King Saul as before. And we see how the story will continue. Again, lovely scenes from Mark's Gospel, which of course is the shortest of the Gospels, and he's really drawing to our attention the identity of Christ. It's one of the key themes of Mark's Gospel. Who is Jesus Christ? What is this all about? And his identity is key. And of course it's the demons who cry out, "You are the Son of God." And even if the people maybe refuse to accept him. And yet again, imagine the scenes and imagine yourself there, because the crowds are colossal. He's got to get into a boat to avoid himself being crushed and just overwhelmed by all the people. Absolute mobs of people, because he healed them. And unclean spirits, he had cured so many that all who were afflicted in any way came crowding forward to touch him. So such is the faith that we give expression to as we come to the Lord. He certainly touches and heals and cures us of our dis-ease. Not just physical, maybe not always physical illness, but certainly dis-ease of the spirit. Our fallen nature rises again in him, and great reason to rejoice. And now at least, if not then, didn't want to be made known back then, but now certainly our calling is to make him known everywhere.